So how can you heal and move on when you've been in a toxic relationship? Definitely one of the more challenging life experiences that we will go through. And yet it's the kind of experience that almost every single one of us, whether it was a toxic relationship or whether we just got betrayed or got hurt, it's the curriculum that every one of us will go through in our life. It's been said that relationships are eternal, not because the person is physically in our life anymore, but because anytime we think of that person, the emotions that are connected with that relationship bubble up in us. Think about it. When you've had an argument with somebody and then maybe you're in the shower and you're replaying that argument in your head and you notice how your heart's racing and the anger energy is building up in you and there's that resentment that increases in us. While that argument isn't happening in that moment, our body is literally responding to those thoughts as if the argument is still present and still real. And so if you've been hurt, if you've been betrayed, if you've been in a relationship that's felt toxic and dysfunctional for you, what can you do to forgive? What can you do to move on and move forward? Today, I'm going to share with you a 5-step forgiveness process that's been transformational in my life, in thousands of my clients' lives, and I want to share it with you to help set you free. If you're looking for freedom from that toxic relationship, this will be transformational for you. So the first step in this forgiveness process, if we want to free ourselves from a toxic relationship emotionally and move on, is to, when you think about that person, separate the being from the behavior. Now, I know this might sound strange, but if you're wanting to create space in yourself for forgiveness, you can recognize that the being that they are, we're all spiritual beings in this human experience, the spiritual side of our nature is not dictated by our behavior. That the human side, every one of us is going to make mistakes. Every one of us is going to make wrongs. We're going to wrong others. Others are going to wrong us. That behavior you can separate from their beingness. And forgiving the being doesn't mean that you have to condone the behavior. In other words, you can draw a line and say, no, I don't condone that behavior. That is completely inappropriate, not okay, what I'm not allowing into my life. And I'm going to create a space for forgiveness around the beingness of this person. I'll give you an example of how this particular idea really supported one of my clients. She started dating this guy. It was the first guy in a long time that she really felt chemistry for, had a lot of excitement about. They went out for about a month. They slept together. They were kind of building this relationship. And then he comes to her and he's like, hey, look, I really like you, but I've noticed I'm just at a phase in my life where I don't want a serious committed relationship. And so I apologize for kind of what we've created, but I'm going to take a step back. And she's like, okay. And while it hurt, she understood. Well, the next week, she sees his car at her same condo complex. And she's like, I wonder what's going on. And then she sees him walking with one of her neighbors. Turns out he didn't want time for himself. He didn't want to just focus on his life and his business. He started dating her neighbor. And the two of them got into a serious relationship right after he had dated her and told her that he didn't want anything serious. And so just imagine how my client felt in that moment. She felt pissed, felt betrayed, felt lied to. And not only by him, but she felt betrayed by her friend, who was her neighbor. And so now the two of her ex and her neighbor are dating. And so my client, when she has to walk her dog in the morning on the sidewalk, she's now walking past that guy's car. So step one for my client in creating room in her heart for forgiveness for this guy was to separate what he did, his behavior, from the beingness. In other words, that his spirit, his being, she could make room and space to forgive and not condone that behavior, which leads us right into step number 2, which is to generate compassion. Generate compassion. And you do that by recognizing that whatever the person's behavior was, no matter how horrible it was a representation of their level of awareness. And the practice here in generating compassion is to recognize that if you truly knew what the other person's full story was, in other words, you knew what happened to them when they were a 5-year-old kid between them and their dad, or them and their mom, or you knew the pain they went through in the breakup when they were in junior high, or you knew how people and the kids treated them or bullied them in their high school experience, or you knew what happened to them as a professional. If you really knew what that person's journey was, there wouldn't be one person's journey that you wouldn't have a degree of compassion for, no matter how challenging or difficult or perceivably bad their actions were. there would be a part of you that could generate a degree of compassion. And that's the starting point of forgiveness, is that degree of compassion to say, they've had it a particular way. And so the behavior they're giving you is a perfect reflection of their level of awareness that's been cultivated through their story. In other words, often we think people could do better than they're doing. We think people could give us more than they're giving. I love this particular analogy. Imagine that often we think someone is only giving us 6 ounces of honesty, for example. But we think we have a glass that can hold 16 ounces, so they're holding out on us. What if their glass is only 6 ounces and they're giving us everything they can? That's this principle, is to recognize they're giving us exactly what their level of awareness at the time can give us. So the spiritual practice here is to recognize that if indeed you did know their whole story, you would feel compassion. Could you feel compassion in the absence of knowing their story? One of the great examples of this is a story that my mom told me. When she went to the grocery store one day, she was being checked out by the checker and she was overcharged by a particular item. And the checkout lady was like offended that my mom brought it up. And she was like, oh, this is, and she rung it back up and she got all mad and she kind of scanned the items and slammed them into the bag. And my mom was like, she had never experienced a checkout person at the grocery store that rude. As my mom got out to the parking lot, she spoke to the guy who was helping her with her bags and she was like, wow, that's the rudest checkout lady I have ever seen in my life. And the guy who was helping her with her bag said, oh my gosh, I know, I feel so bad. That checkout woman, she's an only mom and her 10-year-old son was hit by a car today and he's in intensive care and she was going to lose her job if she didn't come into work because our manager is a jerk. And in that moment, my mom felt nothing, no anger, no resentment. It just instant compassion for that woman. Like, oh my gosh, I would be super stressed too. You can't be with your child. So what happened in that moment? The only difference between 2 minutes before where my mom was angry at that woman and 2 minutes later where it was compassion, the difference was she knew her full story. And so what if we gave ourselves permission to say, wow, if I knew that I would get there anyway, how about in the absence of knowing the full story, I'm going to generate a little bit of space for compassion. And that opening then moves us into the third step. And the third step is to activate the loving kindness prayer. The loving kindness prayer is when you think the thought of the betrayal moment or the time that they perpetrated you or what they said to you, or you're going over that argument again in your head, whatever that is, you interrupt the thought. You say, no, that was then and this is now. And what you do is you actually send this person, as wild as this is going to sound, and as much as you don't want to do this, there's going to be a part of you that does not want to do this, I promise you. But if you cause yourself to do this, it will change your life. And so here's the key. You get to decide what are the blessings you send to that person, what 3 positive emotions you wish for them, but make those the same positive emotions you wish for yourself. So you could say, I wish you love, I wish you peace, I wish you joy, and I release you now as I wish myself love and peace and joy, and I claim it now. And here's what you're doing is when we're betrayed by someone, we've got that negative pain associated with the thought of them. When we do this process, we're actually replacing that negative association, that painful association, with an association of positive love, of joy, of peace, whatever it is that we're claiming. And when you wire and fire that thought over and over and over again, you begin to reduce the amount of resentment. You begin to reduce the amount of charge that you have, how amped and triggered you get when you think about this other person. It's amazing. And so my client separated the being from the behavior. She generated a space of compassion in her to make room for this blessing. So anytime she looked at his car outside her apartment or would see the two of them walking on the street, instead of being seething and angry with him, she created compassion in a space and sent him a blessing and say, hey, I wish you love, I wish you joy, I wish you peace, and I release you now as I wish myself love and joy and peace. And that whole energy began to soften in her. And then this leads me to step number 4 and step number 5, which are super important, which most people miss. And it's recognizing that forgiveness isn't only about the other person. But often when we're really anchored in this betrayal energy, part of it is we're pissed at ourselves, creating a space to forgive ourselves for letting it happen, angry at ourselves for choosing this person, angry at ourselves for not speaking up when we know we needed to speak up, angry at ourselves for not seeing the signs that we should have seen that this person wasn't the right person for us. It's this self-anger that's projected outward that can trap us. So if you notice that there's parts of yourself that you want to forgive, then the moment you wish yourself the peace and joy and love, and I claim it now, you can add to that, placing your hands on your heart, taking a deep breath in. You can say, and I forgive myself and I love myself now. I forgive myself and I love myself now. And then this leads us to step number 5. And this is important, that if you notice that you didn't speak up when you wanted to speak up, or that you let something slide, or you chose the person when you knew that wasn't the right person to choose, then what you want to do in order to really set yourself free to move forward, because this formula is how do you heal and move on? The moving on part is a recommitment to yourself, because you want to be able to trust yourself. Trust yourself that you're not going to recreate the same pain. And the way that you do that is you commit a new way of being moving forward. The pain was created by a level of awareness and an old way of being. You now have new awareness. You're not the same person you were before that relationship. The only thing next that's left is a recommitment to say, hey, when I see something that's out of alignment, I'm going to speak up. I'm going to put a boundary on my standards. I'm not going to choose someone who I know isn't meeting those standards. And you make a commitment to yourself. And when you do that, your subconscious mind goes, oh, I can trust myself. Oh, I can actually trust my intuition. Oh, I can give myself freedom to move forward. And that is when you really start to feel unleashed and free of that old pain. You feel expanded with love. You feel this deep sense of love and acceptance for yourself, and it is transformative. So my question for you is, what's really supported you in healing? When you've been in a toxic relationship and you want to heal and move on, what's really supported your journey and your process? I would love to read that. Post that in the comment section below, as we're all on this journey of healing and expanding. And know this, I believe that you have everything required right now to heal, to move on, and to create the extraordinary love life that you would love. I appreciate you. I've got your back. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.